Whatever you've probably read something of his. Science fiction, of course. His Foundation series is a classic. Science fact, chemistry, astronomy, physics, biology, children's books, history, math. One scientist calls him the greatest explainer of the age. The American Humanist Association has named Dr. Asimov the Humanist of the Year, and some religious folk have considered him the incarnation of the devil. In the Great Hall of Cooper Union in New York City, where Americans have been debating ideas since the days of Abraham Lincoln, I asked Dr. Asimov about his faith in the power of human reason.
Are you an enemy of religion?
No, I'm not. I feel that, as seems to me any civilized, humane person should feel, is that every person has a right to his own beliefs and his own securities and his own likings. What I'm against is attempting to place a person's belief system onto the nation or the world generally. That is really the glory of science, that science is tentative, that it is not certain, that it is subject to change. What is really, in my way of thinking, disgraceful is to have a set of beliefs that you think is absolute and has been so from the start and can't change, where you simply won't listen to evidence. You say, if the evidence agrees with me, it's not necessary. If it doesn't agree with me, it's false. At any rate, science fiction is important because it fights the natural notion that people would have that somehow there's something about things the way they are right now which are permanent. Democracy cannot survive overpopulation. Human dignity cannot survive it. Convenience and decency cannot survive it. As you put more and more people onto the world, the value of life not only declines, but it disappears. It doesn't matter if someone dies.
You're how old now?
68.
You've lived through a lot of this century. Have you ever seen human beings think with the perspective you're calling on them to think now?
Well, it's perhaps not important that every human being thinks so. How about the leaders thinking so? How about the opinion makers thinking so? Ordinary people might follow them if we didn't have leaders who were thinking in exactly the opposite way. If we didn't have people who were shouting hatred and suspicion of foreigners, if we didn't have people who were shouting that it's more important to be unfriendly than to be friendly, if we didn't have people shouting somehow that the people inside the country who don't look exactly the way the rest of us look, or something's wrong with them. Again, it's almost not necessary for us to do good. It's only necessary for us to stop doing evil, for goodness sakes.
When I began to write science fiction way back in the 1930s, or the Middle Ages as I like to think of it, that was a time when space travel was absolutely science fiction. Even a trip to the moon was science fiction. One of my first stories was about someone getting into a rocket ship and going around the moon and coming back. And boy, was that a stroke of imagination on my part. And now, long since, we've reached the moon in much more complicated fashion than I dreamed of in my science fiction. We've done much more. We live in a space-centered society practically now. We can't do without our satellites, communication satellites, our navigation satellites, our spy satellites. And the odd thing is that if we were only to go back 40 years and try to talk about it, everyone would sneer.